Okay, hello. I just want to do a quick review of the book Everything is Fucked by Mark Manson. So this is the guy who did The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I've not read that one yet. I just went straight to this one. I heard it was a bit more... I heard it was kind of better in a way. A bit more gone into it. Without sounding like a snob, I heard it was a little bit more intellectual kind of thing. So it did appeal to me a little bit more on a personal development point of view. And also I think the first one kind of put me off a little bit just because it was so popular, and I just kind of thought, I don't know, I make that mistake sometimes with books. I tend to think when they're really, really popular, it kind of puts me off, and then eventually I get around to reading them and I think, shit, I should have read it the whole way along. It's popular for a reason. So I probably will give the first one a go at some point, but I really enjoyed this book. It doesn't get fantastic reviews. I was quite surprised. If any of you watch any of my videos, I review books quite frequently. I've got through about 10 books so far just in January alone this year. I haven't reviewed all of them. I hope to review all of them at some point throughout the year, but I generally do about a review a week, something like that, sometimes more than that. I tend to read about a couple of books a week, something like that, or listen to them on Audible as well. I'm really keen on personal development. I'm really keen on helping people achieve their goals. I'm really keen on business, entrepreneurship and things. But the reason this book really appealed to me is because actually the message is kind of what I've come to conclude myself after sort of a couple of years of intense kind of personal development myself. So I started reading personal development books a couple of years ago. I've got through quite a few in that time. I started off a little bit superficial, kind of thought, I'm not always been great with money, so I'm going to focus on money, I'm going to make loads of money, and really, why not just do it, just focus on that and improve. And I've learned over the last couple of years through reading personal development books, lots of different books, that if you want to be successful in life, A, making money isn't necessarily going to make you happy on its own. It can help, but it's not going to make you completely happy on its own. And B, if you want to make more money, you've got to become a better person in the first place, and you've got to be able to bring more value to people to begin with. So, there are people who are pretty scummy who manage to make loads of money, but I would rather be someone who's kind of happy in myself, self-fulfilled in other ways before I worry too much about that. And he does make the point in the book that it's not necessarily about focusing on how many yachts you can have and cars you can have and kind of imagining them and then getting, imagining them and picturing them and suddenly you're going to achieve them. It's actually more about picturing how you could be happy without those things. So how you can be happy without a yacht, without an expensive car, without all the latest clothes and all the rest of it. And if you can become the person who's happy without those things, then that's even better. You don't even need to go out, and then if you make enough money to buy those things, then you don't even necessarily want them anyway. And surely that's a better way to be, rather than be some flash fool who just wants to spend money for the sake of it, just to show off to people. So it's a really interesting book, and he makes that point. He calls it so it's Everything is Fucked. It's a book about hope, and it's really interesting the way he talks about hope. He talks about hope as not necessarily always a good thing. We tend to think of it as a really good thing. People say the opposite of being happy. So people say that being depressed is feeling hopeless, and the opposite of feeling depressed is feeling hopeful. So you've got something to hope for and look forward to. But he kind of makes the argument that hope isn't necessarily always a good thing. He says that the Nazis were hopeful. They wanted to transform Germany and get it back to being great again. And so they had this vision of hope, but actually it was kind of a real evil vision that ended up causing millions of people to be tortured and killed, and we know the rest of it. So he talks about hope from that perspective, and it goes back to the myth of Pandora and opening Pandora's box, which I find really interesting. He references lots of really interesting stuff. There's loads of stuff in there. It's quite deep in places, and some people say in the reviews that there's not much cohesion, that it kind of jumps around a little bit, but I didn't particularly mind that. It didn't particularly bother me. I found that it sort of worked well anyway. It might jump from one thing to another, but it was still the same kind of message, so I really liked that. I'd never heard of the Easterlin paradox before. So that is the idea that money, an increase in wealth, increases happiness to a certain extent, but once you get to a certain level of wealth, that kind of stops. It sort of levels out, and sometimes it can go down. I'm not sure if I'm 100% right about that, but look it up. It's quite an interesting theory or statistic. So it's the idea that more and more money doesn't make you happy anyway, and that's been kind of shown through research in different societies. He talks about the fact that we sort of, going back to kind of the wanting yachts and stuff like that, we have quite a self-entitlement in the West. And that's something that I see all the time. And that's something I've seen in myself over the years to a certain extent. I think I'm better at that nowadays. But he talks about it as kind of we're returning to a level of maturity of a child. So a child just thinks that they deserve something because they want it. They want it, they've seen it, and they should have it. Why not? They don't have any concept of working for it or kind of doing anything for it. They just feel they deserve it because they want it. And very much in our society we say things like, you've worked hard, treat yourself, have it, you deserve it, blah blah blah, buy that new car, go on that holiday. It's like, well, do you actually deserve it, or is that just kind of marketing, advertising speak? They're telling you that you deserve it because you've worked hard, so go and splurge, spend your money and do it. It's like, well, actually you don't deserve something just because you feel as though you do and just because you've worked hard. Actually, if you look at it from another point of view, we're lucky we're able to work hard. We're lucky that we live in a sort of capitalist society that, for all its faults, does work a lot better than most societies. And actually, we have the opportunity to work hard and to improve ourselves and to work on ourselves. And that's everything he's saying about hope as well, is that we shouldn't hope for something different. Because when you're hoping for something different, you're kind of being quite ungrateful and sort of saying, what I have here, it's all well and good, but I'd rather have something else. I'd rather hope for more. What we should be doing, what he says, is we should be hoping to become better people, and we should be working on becoming better people. And whether that means, and that doesn't mean necessarily making more money, becoming more superficial so we can buy a different life. It means accepting to a certain extent what we've got, appreciating what we've got, loving the people that are important to us, loving ourselves, looking after ourselves, being grateful. And hoping for that, rather than hoping for more deeper connections with people, rather than hoping for something different, a more expensive house or more holidays or a better car, stuff that we're told, we're kind of brainwashed to think that we should want and that we deserve, and we don't. Basically, it's like we kind of it's really self-entitled, and it can really cause quite a lot of harm to people to think like that. He talks very much about the feelings brain and the thinking brain, and he basically says if you think that the thinking brain is in charge of the feelings brain, then you are sadly mistaken. It's the feelings brain all the way, and there's lots of research to talk about this. Is it Daniel Kahneman in Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow? I haven't read that one yet, but I will do at some point, and I'll do a review on that. He talks about that in a lot of detail. Jordan Peterson, I've heard talking about it before. It's quite it's quite a well-known sort of thing. It's this idea that it's kind of I think it's our limbic system that sort of works and reacts to things and gives us these feelings of either sort of happiness or fear or whatever it is. And then our brain is we see as our kind of our higher self that kind of does the so-called controlling, kind of makes a decision and has the executive functioning and stuff like that. But actually the argument is that the feeling brain, the limbic system, the body, is actually very much in charge. And even when we think we're suppressing the feeling brain, we're not. We're just kind of using our thinking brain or the other way around to sort of... Or the feeling brain is tricking our thinking brain into thinking it's in charge, but actually the thinking brain is doing things to appease the feeling brain, if that makes sense. So, just for example, if you say you give up alcohol for a certain amount of time, maybe, well, I did that recently, and I know that one of the things that I did to help with that was that I kind of convinced myself with my thinking brain that I would feel better for it, that I'd appreciate life more, I'd get more sleep, I'd feel happier. And that was me kind of appeasing my feeling brain, my kind of limbic system, sort of saying, you will actually feel physically better for doing it. And if you slip back into it again, it's your feeling brain kind of saying, yeah, I fancy a drink, actually, make me feel better. So it's put much more succinctly, intelligently than I've just said it, and more clearly. But it's this idea that basically, we can try to control our feelings and our emotions as much as we like, but actually they're in charge, they're in the driving seat. Doesn't mean there's nothing you can do about it. You do your best to use your sort of higher self to be disciplined and to take small steps, but actually it's essentially your feelings and your emotions that are kind of very much in charge. So I found that really interesting as well. And yeah, there's loads of stuff in there. He talks about different theorists. There's some different stories from history in there that are really interesting. At the end, he goes on, which I found I kind of agree, there wasn't much cohesion. It didn't feel like at the end he goes on to artificial intelligence. Whether it needed to go there or not, I don't know, but it was really interesting. I found it was just a bit on artificial intelligence and what could potentially happen with being taken over by AI, what the world would look like, how in some ways we've been on this journey for millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years, and actually it's almost potentially inevitable that we're just going to get ourselves to this crazy level where actually we have these new gods that are artificial intelligence, and actually we'll be just like the people from centuries ago, millennia ago, where they worshipped gods like thunder and the sun and the wind and things like that. We'll actually be worshipping gods that we're not even necessarily aware of, that are artificial intelligence, and we'll be doing things to please them. And yeah, read the book, it'll explain it far more clearly than I can tell you from memory, but really, really good. I really enjoyed it. Everything is Fucked, a book on hope by Mark Manson. Really, really worthwhile.